All right, let's dive right into this explainer. What we're looking at today is an incredibly intense, complex situation drawn straight from the... We've got a really fascinating mix here. Deep technological philosophies, massive systemic critiques, and some absolutely explosive personal allegations made by the founder, Kyle MacLean Smith. We're going to see exactly how this team connects the dots between global finance, personal sovereignty, and fundamentally, the very architecture of computers.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Allegations of financial corruption, 2. The human toll, 3. Canada's property rights void, 4. The charter challenge strategy, and 5. Deterministic tech as fix.
Starting right off with Section 1, Allegations of Financial Corruption. According to the team's internal discussions, Kyle alleges severe state-level corruption within major financial institutions, and he really doesn't mince words here. He states flat out that Vancouver Stock Exchange criminality is now infected NASDAQ and directly calls out major tech and financial players. He's pointing a very specific finger at a systemic rot spreading across these global markets.
Now, as we break this down, I want to emphasize that we're impartially exploring Kyle's perspective here. These are extraordinary claims. He firmly believes that major power brokers and intelligence agencies, he specifically names the CIA and the RCMP in these sources, are operating in a way that just fundamentally compromises global financial integrity, and that he is a direct state-sponsored target of this manipulation.
That brings us to Section 2, the human toll. These macro-level allegations of global corruption tie directly into what Kyle describes as an unbearable, micro-level, personal reality. His own intense words frame him not just as a tech founder pushing boundaries, but as a literal political refugee fighting against deep systemic forces. And it's a heavy burden. He explicitly says his ultimate goal through all of this is simply to have his family back.
The internal documents reveal a staggering emotional toll. Kyle alleges his family was basically thrown into a meat grinder of state-level operations. He actually states his belief that his wife, Emmy Milena Pravik, was human trafficked or potentially killed. He claims to have endured years of deep RCMP psychological operations, or SCOPs, targeting him personally. Furthermore, he argues that a modern network state is actively trying to eradicate monogamy entirely, which he says destroyed his marriage. It is a really dark picture of intense financial hardship and just total loss.
Let's move on to Section 3. Canada's property rights void.
So, you might be wondering, how does a founder actually lose all their assets like this? During their strategy sessions, team member uncovers this shocking piece of internal research. Fundamental property rights were actually left out of the Canadian Constitution back in the 1980s because of a political compromise. On the calls, you can hear her sheer disbelief that Canada literally does not protect property rights at a constitutional level.
And this is the crucial point for the team. Kyle attributes his total loss of assets directly to this massive void in Canadian law. He argues that this specific loophole is exactly what allows bad actors and a corrupt legal system to completely strip individuals of their wealth and sovereignty.
Which leads perfectly into Section 4, the charter challenge strategy.
Let's define the battlefield they're setting up. A charter challenge is essentially how citizens in Canada fight back when they believe the legal system itself has failed their constitutional rights. Kyle see this as the absolute best mechanism to force this issue of property rights directly into the public and legal eye.
This is a seriously ambitious playbook. Kyle talks about taking U.S. textualist philosophy and marrying it with a Canadian living tree philosophy. By attacking the legal system over this property rights void, he hopes to implement massive witness and reconciliation commissions to force real accountability. And if the physical courts fail them, the team's plan is to use legal engineering to enforce strict digital accountability instead.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Deterministic Tech as Fix. This is where it gets super interesting technically. According to Kyle, the current financial system runs on floating-point math, specifically the Newton-Raphson method, which inherently relies on approximations and guessing. Because it's not perfectly exact, he argues it creates a black box that's completely untraceable and prone to corruption. The vision? It relies on fully forensic, deterministic computing using arithmetic logic units, or ALUs, where 1 + 1 always equals exactly 2, zero guessing.
To put that into perspective, Kyle claims that 80 to 90% of current server farms, including massive ones like NVIDIA's, are running on this non-forensic floating point math. So, his argument is that any system running on floating point, meaning the massive infrastructure currently holding your personal and financial data, is fundamentally incapable of processing true, secure information simply because it lacks strict mathematical certainty.
To de-jargonize this a bit for us, deterministic computing basically creates an absolutely undeniable digital paper trail based on exact numbers. Kyle refers to these exact mathematical foundations as Paul-Lucas numbers, or what he compresses and calls Pell-Smith numbers. It's all about completely removing the guesswork, ensuring that financial ledgers can be fully, 100% transparently audited.
So how do they deploy this without just getting exploited by the very financial systems they're critiquing? Kyle uses this brilliant analogy, the Taylor-Swift model. In traditional tech, developers hand over their IP and get trapped doing service-based work for VC liquidators. But under the Taylor-Swift model, the creator retains absolute sovereignty over their intellectual property. They act as the core energy provider and just use API calls to let external partners act as arm's-length resellers, completely shielding the creators from liability and theft.
Bringing the whole shebang together, here is the blueprint. By combining an aggressive legal charter challenge targeting those missing constitutional property rights with an undeniable forensic deterministic technology and then distributing it safely via sovereign APIs, actually believes they can build a parallel system that protects founders from state-level criminality and financial exploitation once and for all.
As we wrap up this explainer, looking at this wild, intense blend of constitutional law, computer architecture, and a fight for personal survival, we really have to ask ourselves something. If the underlying code of modern finance is as flawed, approximate, and corruptible as alleges, what does that actually mean for true sovereignty in the digital age? Who is really holding the keys to our collective future? It's something to think about for sure. Keep questioning the systems around you.